Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Mollie McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today is Kashif Khan, who is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the DNA Company, where personalized medicine is being pioneered through unique insights into the human genome. With the largest study of its kind globally, the DNA Company has developed a functional approach to genomic interpretation, overlaying environment, nutrition, and lifestyle on the genetic blueprint to create personalized and deterministic health outcomes. As CEO of the DNA Company, Kashif later learned that his neural wiring was actually genetically designed to be entrepreneurial. He has since made it his mission to build the DNA Company into a business that has impact and whose success is measured not in dollars earned, but in lives improved. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation today. It lends itself to this concept of a genomics-based lens by which we can lean into optimizing our sleep, taking into account how our genes can play a role in this conversation. Certainly with the focus on sleep, but we also get into the many varied things that influence our sleep, from our nutrition, from our exercise, from our stress management, from our lifestyle choices, a number of things from a vantage point of how they can influence our sleep results, but how we can be informed from our genetic blueprint. So I think you're going to really enjoy today's conversation. And without further ado, let's jump in. All right, you all, I'm so excited to announce our new sponsor, Soul CBD. When I was at my lowest point dealing with my insomnia, CBD was one of the key compounds that I leaned into to combat my crippling anxiety, calm my nervous system, and support my journey to entrain my circadian rhythm. But of all the brands out there, where can you go that you can have a strong trust in their quality? Well, Soul CBD is completely THC-free, organically farmed, gluten-free, and third-party tested for toxins. And bonus, the company is created by a brother and sister duo who have both made wellness their mission in life. And I'm good friends with Angie Lee, their co-founder, so I've seen her commitment to health and sleep behind the scenes, and she really walks her talk. Now, one of the things that is great about Soul is that they aim to help create rituals around your CBD use, and sleep and rituals are best friends. For instance, I love that Soul CBD supports a nighttime bath routine with their CBD bath bombs, which help to combat stress, soothe aching muscles with a mix of CBD essential oils and dead sea salts. Another ritual that we aim to cultivate in the realm of sleep optimization is circadian rhythm intermittent fasting, which is really all about eating your meals between sunrise and sunset. And Soul CBD has very popular gummies that can serve as a nighttime dessert or treat to look forward to without caving to ice cream. Nice alternative. My go-tos personally are their oils, capsules, topicals, and even CBD bath bombs. It's helpful for anyone who struggles with anxiety, pain, or sleep. Now, particularly when I'm traveling, I like to lean into as many things as possible to help with inflammation, and CBD does just that. Now, here's a really cool part. You get 15% off automatically and free shipping when you go to mysoul.com/sleep is a skill. I'm going to say that again. You get 15% off automatically. All you have to do is go to this link, which will be in the show notes, mysoulcbd.com/sleep is a skill. All right, let's get on to the show. And welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. I am really delighted to share with you my guest today. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I know you got lots of stuff on your calendar. I really, really appreciate the time.
No, it's awesome to join you. Pleasure.
Oh, well, we were speaking beforehand before hitting record, and I know there's tons of stuff that we can discuss. And I know your business is at this place where it's just a tsunami of new things, opportunities, all these things kind of just happening to really make a difference in the world. So we're going to jump right into it and wanted to put the spotlight onto you to share a little bit of the DNA company. How did you come about to be a part of a creation of something like this? What does this all look like? And then how does this relate to the world of sleep?
So I am probably the least likely person to be doing this. I don't have a science background. I don't come from the space. I used to actually deal with luxury goods and sell expensive trinkets to really rich people. That's what I do.
Yes.
And in that, I lost control of my own health. Right? I
Mm,
literally, my weight, my migraines, I would literally leave the office with nausea from migraines. And I didn't know what was going on. You take for granted that these things are just meant to happen and you don't really know. And that's where I started to learn and develop and completely change things for myself. And the thing that drove, I would say the biggest outcomes for me were understanding what choices I need to make through understanding my genetics, which was the company we then built on the science of somebody named Dr. Mansoor Mohammed, who some of your listeners may have heard of. Brilliant man when it comes to functional genomics. And we sort of took him out of the clinic and said that this jewel that we were meant to unlock, our DNA, it's our human instruction manual. We never really got there. If you talk to someone about DNA, yeah, I'm half Irish, or my ear's connected to my head, or it's not. It's that kind of stuff. Or there's a
yes.
hardcore diagnostic of like you got a rare breast cancer, like clinical application. But that thing in the middle of tell me who I am and how do I live, which is what my code is telling my cells in my body, we never really got there. And so this is what Mansoor was doing. So we took from him his clinical insights and put it into an AI so that it was accessible to people. Now we've got it to the point where it's actionable, where, as opposed to you got a 80% chance of Alzheimer's. That's your typical genomic report.
Yeah.
What did that give me other than Alzheimer's, or like not Alzheimer's, but anxiety, maybe, instead?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Am I 80 or 20? Like, what does this mean? It still doesn't tell me anything.
Right.
So that's where we started. And we said that genetically, why is somebody in the 80 or 20? There's some suboptimal system. It's not that this gene causes Alzheimer's, right? That's genetics. And by the way, that is true of things like sickle cell syndrome. You're born with it. There's a gene variant causing it. One day there'll be a genetic therapeutic that gets rid of it. Until then, you have to live with it and treat it. Meanwhile, 90% of our problems, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular, anxiety, depression, menopause issues, all this stuff, the chronic diseases, you're not born with any of that stuff. This happens over time because you made the wrong choices for too long that are mismatched to your genomics. The way you eat, the way you exercise, the way you sleep, obviously,
Yep.
not matched to what your body was designed to do. That's what we then studied. So that's where we focused. We said there's enough science out there about DNA. Everyone knows what the genes mean. How does the body work? What are the genes telling our cells to do?
Mm.
Not 80% of people with this gene variant got Alzheimer's. Why did they get it? Right? So we then looked and we clinically reviewed. And so I've been going on. This is the last thing I'll tell you was my drawn out intro.
No, I love this. It's already lots of information right there that and
Yeah,
resonates too. I think a lot of people relate.
for sure. If anyone's been through DNA testing, it will resonate for
Yeah.
sure. That you get to that 80-20. What was the difference between the 80% that got the Alzheimer's and the 20% that didn't? They had the same suboptimal genetic profile that's saying you're a much more higher propensity or likelihood. So what did those 20% do that they didn't get it?
Mm.
Nobody was asking that question. That's what we did. So we set out to then conduct the largest study of its kind in the world. We spent 3 years studying 6,000 people,
Mm.
one by one, by one, by one, by one, by one. From I need to lose weight to I have breast cancer, everything in between. And we understood for the people who expressed the disease, what were they doing in their environment, nutrition, and lifestyle? That load on the genetics. It's one thing to have the genetic suboptimability, but if you live on a beach in Aruba with no exposure to anything, no problem, right?
Yeah.
You could have the best genomics and have bad sleep, bad stress, bad diet, bad everything, and it's a problem, right?
Mm.
So that's what we studied and it wasn't the same for everybody, right? You would think that there's some things that are obvious, which they are, but there's some nuances that really keto diet, yes or no? Well, there's a specific gene that metabolizes fat. So it is actually a yes or no. Should I do it? Should I not do it? Those
Yeah.
types of things. That's where we landed. And we said, now our AI can take all these things. And instead of a gene report saying you have gene DRD2 allele GG, which you then need to go into Wikipedia and figure out what that means, or an encyclopedia. It's anxiety, low, medium, high risk. Here's why. By the way, here's the genetics that informed it if you need to know. But we're getting straight to, I need to know what's wrong with me and how do I fix it at the root cause level.
Wow.
So that's where, the outcome of meeting 6,000 people led us to that.
And so that was one of the biggest takeaways of this. And you said this is the largest study ever conducted of its kind in this realm. And that was some of the takeaways that you're able to get out of that. It was one, how to make this actionable. Two, looking for some of those exceptions, like not just looking at the 80%, but what about those 20%,
exactly.
In the example. And then some of these things that are just, as you pointed to, like these chronic diseases that just we're starting to live in this fishbowl of, oh yeah, of course, anxiety, everyone's got it. Some of these stressors, some of the keto, it's, going to be good. It's going to be bad, depending on which group you're speaking to. But to have this knowingness that there can be this bio-individuality that we can lean into, really fantastic stuff. So out of all of this information gathering that you've done, when we think of sleep, how could we learn about things that we can either do to improve our sleep, optimize our sleep, insights about our sleep, supplements, lifestyle? What could we gain from or learn about from this model?
So sleep for us was an interesting one because we had no intention of solving that problem.
Yeah.
But in dealing with 6,000 people, it became one of the number one things we ended up dealing with.
Really?
Right? As a biotech company, what do you look at? Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancers. Those are the things, the big problems that you hear about every day. Sleep is probably as big, if not bigger. It's a 30 to 50, depend where you look, 30 to 50% of Americans have this issue.
Yeah.
That's big enough, right? That's just like cardiovascular by the time you look at the numbers, right? Now, all of the people we went through, we landed in that same place where 30 to 50% of them are saying, I can't fall asleep, I can't stay asleep, or I wake up and I just feel like I didn't sleep. It's kind of three different problems, right? So we started to dive into not, hey, is there a sleep gene? Because that's not the way we think. We thought, what is preventing this person from actually falling asleep at the biochemistry level? What is preventing this person from staying asleep when they've got into a deep level of sleep? Why do they wake up in the middle of the night? So as an example, there's one gene called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which you're familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. Neuroplasticity. Its primary purpose as it's studied is to help support concussion, repair, recovery, even help you prevent, meaning it's like your armor plate on your skull, right? That same gene does a lot more than what it's studied for in concussion. It regulates mood and behavior. The first thing I mentioned, neuroplasticity. So now you know these things technically, but what is what we call the phenotype? So what companies typically study is the genotype. This gene means this. What does that mean for me? The physical trait is the phenotype, the net result. So the net result of having poor BDNF is my circadian rhythm is out of whack. My internal body clock isn't working. Right? So where it's studied for concussion medically, it also does other things. It regulates mood and behavior also. It's that, call it drama queen response, that weight that I give things, when I give things extra meaning. If I had the suboptimal version, the person that would slam the door, walk out of a meeting, yell and scream that they could get there quickly, that's their reaction level. Suboptimal BDNF. They're unable to regulate their mood, their reaction. If you have that and you are on your laptop, and these are things I'm sure you've spoken of many times, on your laptop at night with a blue light, on your phone, you're tricking, that person is much more susceptible to not knowing if it's daytime or nighttime. Right? That's the person for whom 2 hours before they go to sleep, they need to shut everything off. But if you have the optimal version, it's not as big of a problem.
So right? I love what you're speaking about here too, because we've had different holistic psychiatrists on the podcast speaking about certain theories around people with certain mental health issues being more sensitive, more light sensitive, but it was certain theories. And yet to bring some of this black and whiteness to it and measurable element here is really something that we could lean into and really make a difference with. So that's incredible.
Well, you said there's exactly what we believe has sort of come out of our study is that all this gray area, female hormones, you know, where it's like, it's just taken for granted. Yeah, you're supposed to have those problems, hormones, right?
Right.
It's actually very black and white. Same thing with sleep, this area that just isn't studied properly, where you start to see these correlations that, oh, every time somebody complains about this, their behavior is like this. And that's where you're saying that the people that look at the psychology of it are finding those combinations, but they don't know what's driving it. And if you understood what's driving it, you get right to the root.
Yes.
And another example, take me, for example, I'll be the guinea pig.
Yeah.
So why am I entrepreneurial? Why did I jump from what I was doing as we started this podcast to what I'm doing now, which they have nothing to do with each other? So dopamine, your pleasure and reward seeking chemical, there's a gene called DRD2, which determines how dense your binders are. How much do you actually experience that pleasure or reward? I have the most suboptimal DRD2, so the most sparse, least density of receptors, right? Then there's a gene called MAO, which is meant to sort of break down the dopamine, preparing you to come back to normal, out of that reward or pleasure-seeking experience. There's an enzyme called COMT, which is commonly studied in association with hormones, but it also clears neurochemicals. So once you're done with that experience, it gets rid of it. So I have the lowest expression of dopamine receptors, so I hardly feel the pleasure or reward. I have the fastest MAO, so it's going away before I've even felt it. And I have the fastest COMT, so as it's being broken up, it's getting cleared out. So what does that lead to? I don't feel anything. So what are my options? Depression. Right? Or addiction, because I've avoided the depression by feeding the pleasure route of dopamine. So I will become addicted to something because I need to constantly create that sense of reward to feel normal. Or achievement, because I went down the reward path as opposed to the pleasure path, which is why I take stupid risks of going from selling a $5 million painting to helping people get out of their healthcare issues, right? Because I see the opportunity. It's just too much for me to say no. And so now I've tried to put personally some things around that to help me sort of focus, but now apply that to sleep. If I do have that, right, that wiring, I can't sleep at night when there's something good happening.
Yeah.
Right. When we have a project with a deadline, not that I'm pressured by the deadline, I'm excited by the outcome.
Yeah, that eustress. Absolutely.
Right. The opposite is also true. Imagine somebody that has the maximum dopamine binding and the slowest COMT that is experiencing reward to a very high degree and it lasts a very long time. To the people around them, they appear to be a flake because they just aren't interested. Right. They're already good. But when they find that thing that gets them to that reward or pleasure that they don't normally experience, they will binge. They get lost in it. So as opposed to me, the addict, that I need to do it every day on time and I schedule around it, the binger will just disappear. 10 episodes of Netflix. And how much does that affect your sleep?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So why is it some people can turn it off and some people can't?
Wow. I work with a lot of poker players, and certainly that dopamine receptor is something that they're quite attuned to because it can be such a benefit if you're not tilted and you're up a million, you're down a million, and, to be able to ride those waves. So to be able to then put these measurements and numbers to this, and when I say numbers, just to have the black and whiteness can really help people navigate make informed choices.
Exactly. As opposed to the trial and error, the one size fits all solutions, which we need to have because you need things that people can just sort of draw on and at least get started.
Sure.
But it is now possible to be precise and to be personalized and to know before you start what you actually need. First of all, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Not the symptom of I can't sleep. Why?
Yeah, the root.
The root,
absolutely.
Right? Then resolve that thing. What do I do about it? And one thing we didn't speak of yet is we realized as we were going about making this easy for people, that was really our goal, both clinicians and consumers. How do we make this easy to use? That's one of the biggest challenges with genomics. And we talked about this. You get your report, it goes in the shelf and you don't look at it because it's like 300 pages. What do you do with all that, right? So we went out, and the same thing when we work with clinics. When we work with them hand in hand, they're like, wow, what you did for my patient, I don't know how you got there. It's incredible. But when we pass the baton, they can't do it because, again, the load of learning, et cetera. So our goal has been, how do you make it easy? How do you make it easy? Is first of all, we speak to the problem, right? If it's sleep, we'll go straight to here's why you can't sleep, uniquely resolving the root, but also uniquely curating what do you do about it? If we know this is a problem, we also know how to fix that problem. Not take some melatonin so you can knock out yourself out, but you still wake up feeling horrible, right?
Yep.
But what's really going on? Then we said, we've done this part as sort of a science biotech company, but to truly affect behavior change, to get people to adopt these practices and actually have outcomes, we needed to understand that part. And so what we did was we went to Dr. BJ Fogg, who is, the author of Tiny Habits,
Sure.
and we worked with him to say, you know how to get people to do things. Like his students built Instagram, they built Noom, they built, Lark, like a lot of these behavioral change platforms. And he came in and said, here's the report. I'm adding the behavioral change elements into them. So now that people know what's wrong with me, how do I fix it? How do I implement? Stop this behavior, start this behavior, move this, change the room to look like this. Like, what are those actual things you do that you actually will implement? That's, I think, the biggest one for us, where we've taken DNA from sort of insight to instruction. It's now actionable. That's the gap that was missing when I went through it.
Yeah.
I had to push and, claw and away to find a way to implement this stuff. And it took a lot of time and effort. So anyway, that's where we finally landed and what we're now doing.
Oh, wow. Insight to instruction. I love that. And the fact that you brought in BJ Fogg is fantastic. Sleep is a skill. So much of our ethos is this intersection of technology, accountability, and behavioral change, and how to make those there's often, in order to strengthen your circadian rhythm and get to some of the roots of some of these issues with our sleep, there might be so many habits that we're looking to shift. And of course, with BJ Fogg, he speaks to this importance of tiny habits. And if we try to change all the things, like, good luck. And especially if you're asking for some of these big, audacious shifts, it's, it takes time, and to have it really stick and have that kind of sticky effect. So love that you consulted with him. It's fantastic. So I'm assuming that anyone listening is like, okay, I'm intrigued. Like, what would this look like for me? One, is this for anyone that has DNA, they could do this? Or are there certain types of people that would really benefit? Are there different kind of ways that they could work to get further insight or guidance? What does this all look like?
So we used to, as a clinical company, do that, say, what do you need? How can we help you? We were getting referred patients from sort of executive clinics and functional doctors everywhere saying, I can't figure this out. Can you help with it? We took it to, we realized what the core things that everybody sort of needs to know, right? As we went through these thousands of people, and we built a product around that, which we call the 360, like all-encompassing report. It dives into 6 things: sleep, right? I can't sleep, I can't stay asleep, whatever the reasons are. Immunity and detox, or really my anti-inflammatory response. Inflammation, of course, being the root cause of all disease.
Yeah.
Let's get to the root. And how do you deal with that? Cardiovascular health, which encompasses everything that's sort of around vasculature. So diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, stroke, cardiovascular issues, which I should tell you a story about that. It'll blow your mind how we actually reversed somebody's cholesterol issue, got them off pills. Yeah, I'll tell you about that. Diet and nutrition. But when we look at diet and nutrition, it does start with macro, micronutrients. What do I eat? How do I eat? Even what time do I eat according to my circadian rhythm? But also, how do I perceive satiety, satiation? How do I perceive, going back to, am I a binger? Am I an addict? Do I lean on food as a coping mechanism? When I walk by the pantry, do I graze and I don't even know I'm doing it? Right? That person that can't get to satiety, so they're leaning on snacking and they don't realize where those calories are coming from. Those types of things. We've added the mood and behavior elements into there. Then fitness and hormones. So all these challenges over, it doesn't matter what I eat, how I exercise, I can't lose weight. Well, that sounds like it's probably hormonal, right? If you're eating right, if you're exercising right, then it comes down to, am I pear shape? Am I whatever shape? That's hormones driving that shape, right? So it goes both ways. For the man or a woman that, I just can't put on weight, I want to put on muscle and get more shapely. That's one hormonal issue. I can't lose the fat and I can't see my 6-pack. That's another hormonal issue. And we deal with that. And it's really impactful for people. But it goes beyond that into some of the hormonal issues that people experience. And the last and probably biggest one, and the thing that we do uniquely that I haven't seen anywhere else, is mood and behavior. So we've decoded all the neurochemicals of the brain. If I have your DNA, I can tell you exactly how you deal with stress, emotion. Do you get affected by trauma like PTSD? Are you irritable? Do you procrastinate? What is it like to work with you? What is it like to be in a relationship with you? What does somebody need to do to get along with you? All of these things we've decoded at the neurochemical level by the DNA driving the neurochemical functions. We've understood that stuff. So that core thing, these 6 elements I just talked about are what we believe everybody needs to go through. So you get these reports. We make sure that a health coach calls you to sort of help you navigate, because that's the other place. You get these few hundred pages. It's a lot of great content. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah.
Right. So step one, health coach. And from there, if anybody wants to get into coaching, we have trained coaches that have a genomic sort of training from ours. Like they're not geneticists. They're trained by us on actionable genomics.
Sure.
Right. How to interpret this stuff, which is really the key word, interpret it. Right.
Yes.
And that's what we do. And in that, we've taken this sort of deep clinical experience where celebrities and professional athletes are paying thousands and thousands of dollars, and we put our artificial intelligence to it to make it affordable for people. And sort of you have access to the instructions, insights to instructions like we talked about, versus a clinical deep dive, which we no longer need because the AI does the work.
Wow. Okay. So out of this, are there different buckets that people could go through if they want kind of some basic AI and health coaching? They go through one path and based on their, if they've got price point and time and what have you. And then say if they want to go all in, are there options to really have even further levels of accountability, or what does that all look like?
So the actual test, in order to do it the way we do it, we have to test for what we test for.
Okay.
That meaning that even to inform diet and nutrition, we have to test for the brain. Even to inform sleep, we have to test for the brain. And our algorithm, it goes through 200 trillion data points, by the way, which when I heard that number from our team, I was like, did you get that number wrong? Do you know, you said trillion with a T, right? He said, no, that's what it is. That's it. Because every system intersects with the other. There's trillions of cells in your body. So imagine that's what it got to. So at the baseline, this is why we offer these 6, because we're testing for it all anyway.
Yeah.
In order to, even if you take the sleep report, we still have to test for it all. So we provide it all. Beyond that, if somebody wants to get deep and clinical, like I have a fertility issue, I just can't get pregnant. Well, guess how many women we've helped get pregnant, right? Or my mom had breast cancer, I'm worried, and BRCA gene tells me 70%. Am I getting it or not? Right?
Yeah.
That's another example. So we have the ability to clinically deep dive beyond that. And we also are launching a whole series of reports over the next year. Well, I should say the balance of this year.
Yeah.
From, female hormones to, career planning, even to childhood behavior, autism, you name an issue, we're building something for it because we worked on it all. And that's what it looks like. The last thing I should say to answer your question, the biggest piece for people is, okay, now you've told me this, I understand myself. What do I need to buy? Like supplements, therapies? Do I need an Aura ring? These types of things. So we're matching all these solutions to the genomics. So imagine going to your own personal page where it's only showing you what you actually need, things you needed and things you didn't even know you needed.
Great. That's awesome.
And that's where Dave Asprey is helping us a lot. So Dave is obviously in the biohacking world. He's known as a guru, probably the founder in some people's opinions. And he's an investor in our company. He loves what we do. And so he's helping us with the solution side. We kind of identify the problem. We say, this gene needs to be upregulated. For women to prevent getting fibromyalgia, we need to upregulate this gene. Here's what we have found that's studied to do that. Tell us what the best product is.
Wow.
Right? And so that's what we're doing, curating all that stuff.
Oh, incredible. Okay. So if we're speaking sort of the ABCs, if people are just sort of newer to this conversation, could you share? So we've got this idea that, okay, we've got these specifics around what can make a difference for so many areas of your life. What about the people that then will say, well, what about epigenetics? And what about ability to change things and, personal will and personal development and all is there a conversation there?
So epigenetics, we believe, has been misunderstood.
Okay.
In terms of really what does it mean and impact. You know what? I'll go back to the example of my friend we were talking about, the cholesterol.
Yes.
Right? So he actually, and that will really paint the picture.
Sure.
So he, at the time, was 38 years old. He's now, I think, he's 41 or 42. And he had a crazy cholesterol issue. Just would not stop getting worse. He ate right, exercised, he wasn't doing anything that was outwardly like pointing to cholesterol. He was also a pharmacist and understood his health quite well. So he came to us actually initially as a friend of mine saying, can I get a pharmacogenomic panel? What is that? A DNA test that tells you what version of what drug you need and to what dosage. So the actual gene that metabolizes the active molecule, we've documented, how does it work? And insurance companies like this, doctors like this, we personally don't use it that much. It's there. I said to him, before we do that, wouldn't it be better if we can get you off pills? If you actually understood why this was happening, disease reversal. He said, that doesn't happen. That's not how disease works. I said, that's what you think because you're a pharmacist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But that's not what we do. So let me try. He became the guinea pig. And this was early days for us, by the way. This was probably when we were at the first few hundred people, right? Out of the 6,000.
Sure.
So what did we discover? We ran his DNA. We weren't looking for a cholesterol gene or a cardiovascular gene. We were just looking for red flags, holes and gaps in his genomics. So what did we find? That his detox capacity, so glutathionization, the ability to bind onto toxins, send them to deliver, to metabolize, pee them out, get rid of them. Typically, you do that in your sleep, which is why sleep is so important. There's two genes that you can forget about what version or SNP or variant. You might not even have them. It's called a copy number variation. You literally did not get it from mom and dad. Quite common for Asian, equatorial, Mediterranean, people that just didn't need it for, how many generations they lived beautifully, good weather, good sleep, good everything, just didn't need it, right? So that was his case. He was missing these genes, and he also had the suboptimal version of the gene that you can't be missing. You can have a version of. He had the suboptimal version. So detox capacity sucked, right? Then your anti-inflammatory response, the ability to deal with that inflammatory insult, whether it's breathing in chemicals, whether it's, doing too much cardiovascular exercise and getting into oxidative stress, right? Those types of things causes inflammation. There's one gene that we hear of, the MTHFR. I'm sure some of your audience is familiar with that. That's one gene. The entire methylation system is a multitude of genes, which upstream and downstream of MTHFR, there's a lot of other stuff going on. And you could have the best MTHFR and be told that your methylation is great. And guess what? It's horrible because everything else sucks. Right? This is where genes are misunderstood. One by one doesn't mean much. You have to look at the system. What is the system doing? The net effect, right? It's like saying your car has a great muffler, you're good to go, and there's no engine under the hood, right? That's kind of what's going on in genetics right now. So his methylation system, most of the way through, was suboptimal, which made sense. If he had bad detox, he probably came from a place where he didn't need it, right? So now we looked at the actual cardiovascular system. And what did we see? 9p21. This determines how robust your endothelial lining is. So most heart disease doesn't happen in the heart. It typically happens in the arteries around the heart. Build up, blockage, calcification. These are the things that lead to a heart attack. The heart's usually pumping right up until the heart attack, no problem, right? So he had that inner lining that the blood actually flows through and touches the inside of the artery. You have different versions. Stainless steel, okay, paper thin. He had the paper thin, which means that this material was more prone to inflammation, abrasion, scratches, damage. Now we take a step back and say he has the worst genetics for what points to cardiovascular. A typical DNA test would say 80% chance of having cardiovascular disease. But that exact same genomic profile, you could live to be 100 without having one cardiovascular incident. What's the difference? The difference was this guy was playing golf 4 days a week. What happens when you play golf? For 4 hours at a time, 4 days a week, he was breathing in all these toxic chemicals and pesticides. What makes that golf course so beautiful?
Yeah, exactly.
All that stuff that he did not have the genetic capacity to bind and clear. So it's just free flowing in his blood because he's way overdosing on exposure, right? The 3 days that he wasn't golfing, he was playing tennis to fight the cholesterol. I need to exercise, right? So what happens when you play tennis? It's high intensity sort of interval training. Stop, run, stop, run, stop, run. That high intensity, what is your cells? What do? They take in nutrition, they take in oxygen to create energy. That's what your cells do. But in that process of converting oxygen to energy, you create oxidants, which are highly toxic. So increase your input, you also increase the output of oxidants. His genetics didn't clear those oxidants. So imagine having a fireplace where the soot is just building up and building up and building up. So he's got these things that he's breathing in, things that he's eating that are entering his bloodstream that he does not clear like some of us do. He's also creating internal free radical or toxic activity by overdosing on cardiovascular exercise. Now, all this stuff is free flowing in his blood. When it gets to that weak endothelial, the 9p21 we talked about, it's actually going to cause damage, scratches, abrasions to that endothelial, which leads to inflammation, right? The body's natural response to inflammation in the arterial system is to deploy cholesterol as a hormone to reduce and mitigate the inflammation.
Mm.
When cholesterol meets toxicity, it hardens and gets deposited. Do that for 15 years.
Yeah.
And after 15 years, your doctor will tell you, hey, you have a cholesterol problem. We need to give you a pill.
Wow.
Not knowing why it happened, not even asking why it's happening. It's just taken for granted that you don't eat right, you don't exercise. By the age of 50, you may have a cardiovascular issue because you just didn't take care of yourself. Well, what does that mean? How do I take care of myself? If you had the optimal genetics and all the things we talked about, you could have done the exact same thing as this guy and had zero issue.
Right.
Or you could have had the suboptimal genetics that he has and just done other things and not had an issue. So we took, I think, 4 months with him, supplemented heavily, supported the detox, changed his cardiovascular to weight resistance training. So he was still staying fit like he enjoyed being without the high intensity cardio. The golf, he wasn't able to stop. So we just heavily supplemented him to support that lack of capacity. And guess what? He's off pills.
What?
Yeah.
That's wild. What do some of those supplements look like? And does he undergo other detox, sort of the standard, the sauna and that sort of thing? Or is there a whole regimen there?
Like that. There was sauna. There was also, so the initial gut reaction from his naturopath that he went to when we told him about this was, you need to get onto a glutathione IV right away. So we paused that immediately and we said it would make logical sense that if he's not glutathionizing properly, that you would give him more glutathione to do more of it. But guess what? How do genetics work? He doesn't have the instruction. It's not that he doesn't have glutathione. He doesn't have the gene telling glutathione what to do. He's missing the instruction. So if you give him glutathione by IV in that heavy of a dose, yes, he's going to bind onto toxins and clear them, but he's also going to bind onto all his nutrients, minerals, and he's going to be in bed for a month. And we've had patients like this. We've had patients where they've gone on IV drips of glutathione, they get worse, and their clinician just thinks that they're so far gone that they need more. And they get to a point where they just can't get out of bed. And that's when we cut the whole thing off and flip it. And we need to get them the precursors, things like NAC, selenium, alpha-lipoic acid that don't require the instruction, right? You also need to support the anti-inflammatory capacity, because it's not just get rid of the toxic insult, but get rid of what it's causing, the inflammation. Because who knows what the disease that's going to lead to? It just depends where the inflammation is happening, right? So we look at things a very different way, and it's more about the why, the biochemistry behind it, as opposed to the symptom, which is that's the last thing you should be looking at. That means it's too late. If there's a symptom, you've been doing this for 10 years already. That's what chronic disease is. Chronic disease is, I made the wrong choice 10 years plus, and it's finally got to a threshold where my body just can't cope, can't fight it anymore.
Well, that example was so helpful because it really breaks down how much of a puzzle this can really become. And, I've had clients that they've spoken to the process of figuring out what's going on with their sleep is sort of like forensic sleepology and all of this sort of back way, really uncovering so many elements. And I love how you even went as deep as what does, his schedule look like? Okay, he's got golfing these days. He's got, high intensity training these days. All of this, it's something that often these things, these clues really can get missed, but they so make up the whole picture. So that's really fascinating. So then from that place, I think we could even go even deeper, and I'll be respectful of your time because I want to even, I want to go in deeper with you. And that was so palpable just to get in there with that example. So thank you. So then switching gears a little bit to yourself, to how, with all this knowledge that you now have, what can we learn from you on how you're managing your sleep and the conversation of sleep? And, we do ask 3 questions to every guest. So the first one for you would be, what does your nightly sleep routine look like? And is it informed by all the knowledge that you have here?
So I did not realize I had a sleep problem until we actually built the sleep report.
Yeah.
Which was a year ago. And until our friends at Aura, we share the same marketing company. So we do some, a lot of sort of crosstalk until I started using the Ring to measure And that's when I really learned that my sleep sucked. And that's
Yeah.
why I would crash at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I just thought I was working too hard, right?
Yeah.
So what did I do to change it, right? What did I learn about myself? Well, the first thing is that because of my behavioral genomics, I have several things going on. One we already discussed is I'm
Yeah.
highly reward seeking.
Sure.
And I'm constantly in business where every day is a new challenge. So the excitement level is too high. I would sometimes wake up at 4 a.m. with an idea and literally wake up and I'm not a morning guy, by the way.
Yeah.
I need to sleep. I don't like getting up early. But that idea that triggers that dopamine response, which I just so rarely get, I could wake up for an hour and a half in the morning and completely screw up my day. And I didn't even, you just I feel like I'm doing great. I'm achieving something. But no. Then the other problem was that I would often, so being a Muslim, I pray 5 times a day.
Sure.
Right? For me, it's important religiously. It's also important to my health because that break for prayer resets everything. And now I do it with purpose. I used to pray for dogma. I used to pray because I had to do it. Now I pray because I realize the benefit it gives me. Right?
Wow.
So in that, I have to pray at a certain time in the morning, which is typically before sunrise, which is hard. You have to interrupt your sleep. That used to screw me up big time. Now that I understand genetically what my sleep cycle looks like, I can time what time I need to sleep. Because keep in mind, I'm in Toronto where sunrise changes from 3 a.m. to like 7 a.m. through the year.
Yeah.
So that constant management, there wasn't a day where I didn't wake up feeling horrible and groggy where it was difficult. Now I can automatically wake up because understanding my sleep cycle, both from the sleep cycle itself, but also the genetics of it. My alarm is, I fall asleep at the right time and my alarm is set at the right time where I wake up awake. And I can then
what
actually
a gift.
and I can actually get back to sleep because I stay awake for the right amount of time. Not too long, not too short. Right. And it's not a problem anymore. That's a unique one because everyone doesn't have that problem, right?
Yeah.
but it is, need to wake up to catch a flight, need to do whatever. This makes a huge difference, knowing when to sleep to be able to wake up. The other big one is being an addict. There were times where Netflix, unfortunately, I got introduced to Instagram.
Oh no. Yeah.
It's very hard to know when to turn it off. And having that regimented schedule with an alarm, part of these tiny habits, the things that Dr. BJ Fogg teaches us, seems obvious, but most adults can't do better than their children who are, supposed to do it for school. It's difficult. That purposeful, this is something I do now. Just like I show up to meetings on time, I do this also on time, right? So that was a big one. The last one I would say is food. So I misunderstood the genetics of my personalized diet. And you would think that eating at night is a bad idea. I actually need to do it. So I need protein at night. I also work out. I train, right? So I'm not a superstar or anything. I just do my regular stuff. But if I don't eat at night, I don't sleep the same.
And when you say at night, what does that look like? Like hours before bed?
Like a couple hours before sleeping.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah, which is counterintuitive to what you would usually hear.
Sure.
Right? And for the most part, by the way, this isn't recommended to people.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're speaking to this because there are those, what can often feel like outliers that you will measurably see that there will be so many markers that really shift favorably for them that don't really defy the kind of cookie cutter or what's becoming the cookie cutter logic of earlier timing. It's really interesting.
What works on 7 out of 10 people is usually what gets recommended. It's those outliers, like you said, the 3 out of 10 that they just keep experiencing failure.
Yeah.
And that's where they need the personalization.
Wow, that's huge. Okay, so now your nighttime routine has evolved, and even in the last few years, and you keep, learning, and that's what you're speaking to right now. And I'm sure talk to you in a year or something, you might have a whole, added layered thing. So I love that level of optimization. And then the second question would be, what would we see on your nightstand, or it could be like your proverbial nightstand, like could be elements of ambiance or apps or supplements or anything that we should be aware of?
So yes to the Oura Ring and the app. I'm tracking, right? And that helps me with that timing of when to sleep and when to wake up.
Yep.
And also on my training days, I actually also have a core detox system. So on the days where I try not to do much cardio, but I maybe once a week serious cardio and a second time a week, like a very short, just to tack on to a workout. So on those days, I have to be careful about my sleep to make sure I recover properly.
Yeah.
And that's a nuance that won't be covered in even something as comprehensive as Oura Ring because I just don't go there. So
Yeah,
I have to
sure.
manually change that. The other thing I've done is because I love working, if I'm awake, I'm working.
Yeah.
Right. Whether I'm with kids, family, whatever, I find a way. Right. Sometimes I get them involved, but whatever, I'm working. So that, and I've learned that wind down time is so important to get the better quality sleep. I can fall asleep, but I'm still spinning in my head and thinking, and then I'll wake up in the middle of the night, still thinking about my dreams are crazy. So I need to wind down and separate myself from work before getting into that sleep routine. So what do? I actually keep a pair of headphones and a laptop next to my bed, which makes no sense because why have the laptop? But that's strictly for YouTube and entertainment, right? And anything that's the exact polar opposite of work. And it's headphones because I don't look at the screen.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right. So I have the laptop so I can find whatever I want to find. It's going to be some comedian on YouTube, or it's going to be some days I'm feeling philosophical and I'll learn about physics or, whatever it is, just something that gets my brain. I need my brain to be spinning.
Yeah.
But I need it to be outside of work so it stops spinning. And that puts me to sleep every night.
Awesome.
It starts off as entertaining, but because I'm not sort of alerting and provoking my reward seeking behavior, the dopamine, I can actually fall asleep into a deep sleep every night. That's what I do. Right.
Wow.
The last thing is, do you know Sachin Patel?
Yes.
Yeah. So Sachin, as a gift, sent me these blue light filter glasses, which I was using previously, but the ones he sent me, I forgot that brand, but they were interesting because they have these clip-on layers.
Oh, Viva Rays, probably.
Viva Ray, correct.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's also sitting on my nightstand because as I'm listening to the audio, I have the deep amber Viva Ray on 20 minutes, half an hour to get me into that state. Right?
That's awesome. Great.
So, yeah, I wasn't doing any of this even a year ago, but like sleep for me is like an experience now. It's like watching a movie. I go into this deep, like it's a vivid color, like it's crazy what I dream about. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And I love that you're in this conversation of improvement and layering on new, kind of stacks. It's fantastic. So then in alignment with that, what would you say out of all of this information and learning and curiosity, what would you say has so far been your biggest sort of sleep aha moment or biggest change to your sleep game?
So one thing we did internally, so as we went through these 6,000 patients, we built a custom compounding facility here in Toronto where we actually literally custom made nutraceutical protocols for people as research to up and down regulate their genetic expression. So when we found an issue, we didn't give them the symptom masking supplement or pill. We would figure out what ingredient up and down regulates that gene. As a simple example, Chinese people in general have very poor detox. Why? Because for how many hundreds of generations did they do, like they sipped on green tea all day long? Doesn't matter where you went, where you sat down, who you went to see, you were served green tea, which has potent, super potent antioxidants in it. I think EGCG, right? So for us, we say that let's not give somebody, again, glutathione, somebody has suboptimal detox. This ingredient is studied to work on an entire population. And this is why all of a sudden in China, you see breast cancer rates and a lot of these healthcare issues that they just didn't have even a generation ago skyrocketing. Because culturally, they've shifted from traditional diet to fast food and they want the American experience, right? So that all being said, we've been custom compounding, experimenting with ingredients, and we actually built a sleep protocol, which we don't actively sell or push. It's available for people, but it's more a research tool for us, which helps you get into that deep sleep. And we've tried it. We've measured with our Oura Rings, the days that we take it, the days that we don't. I would say the impact of, I used to wake up after 8 hours and feel like it was a complete waste. I need to do it over again. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
To now, after 6, I got a spring in my step because I've gotten such high quality sleep. So all of these habits we've talked about, understanding my genome and knowing what my personal needs are, whether good or bad, what I'm good at, what I'm suboptimal at, what needs support, knowing what tools to surround me with, blue light filter glasses, the entertainment, the audio versus video, dimming the lights, these types of things. And then what can we do to supplement? It's always three things: environment, nutrition, lifestyle. Environment is the lights. It's all, lifestyle is when do I do the thing, the routine. And then nutrition is either food or supplements. Food I'm already doing. I make sure to eat so I'm not hungry and having, again, that reward-seeking behavior of wanting to eat something tasty that I'm satisfied. And then the supplements that we make. So we have this product that we call Sleep Optimizer, which again, we haven't really pushed or sold. I don't even know if it's for sale on the website. You'd have to call in and see, but we've been using it clinically in research, and it just gets me into that deep state where I wake up after 6 hours just feeling, wow, I'm ready to go.
Wow. Okay. Well, that perfectly brings us to, if you can share exactly how people can follow what you guys are up to. And then I'm sure there's going to be people that are curious about that Sleep Optimizer. I mean, this is definitely the group for that. So maybe they can check in on that. But what are the best ways for people to get involved in all this?
So, I mean, we got connected to the Biohacking Congress, which is an awesome event, right? And we're going to be there. So if any of your listeners that are going to be in town for the Congress, we're there.
Yes.
Ultimately, through our website, thednacompany.com, the test, the 366 system report we talked about is there currently. The coaching solution supplements are all launching September 15th. And the other thing I would say in terms of following us, I've recently picked up the habit of posting stuff on Instagram in terms of education. 6 months ago, I wasn't using Instagram, right? So I'm Kash Khan official, so KASHKHAN official, but our corporate is the DNA Co. And on both, you can learn. So go there to learn, right? There's videos, there's content, there's stuff and we're on our blog. You're going to find some awesome stuff in terms of how do we, in these 6,000 people we studied, all of the insights we found. One by one, we're posting them all so people can learn. Whether you get a DNA test, take any products, whatever, inside or outside of our organization, if you just want to learn what best habits are, that's in the blog. We keep adding every week. I think they add a couple so people can keep learning.
Oh, I'm going to check those out. And real quick, I know we didn't actually touch on it, but the process of taking the DNA test, if you could just share, because I think, for some people it might, that sounds so intense. Is that like really a big process? Yeah. What does that look like?
So it's a saliva test. So literally you get shipped a saliva selection kit, a spit tube. You spit in it and it goes back to our lab. It takes a few weeks to analyze. You're then notified of two things: your reports and the ability to book that call with a coach to help you navigate it. So they give you 30 minutes. And in that call, they spend a few minutes going over a few of the genes just to show you how we think, some of the stuff we talked about today, right? And then here's how to kind of look at where your priorities are, because it's a lot of content.
Sure. And actually on that note, I don't mean to keep you over, but a quick question. If people are saying, well, years back I did 23andMe or I did this or that, is there any leveraging of that data, or is it a different layering of a testing that they need to uniquely do?
To some degree, yes, but it's not complete. So the funny thing is we actually test for less than 23andMe. They're testing, I think, for 500 or 600 genes, possibly more. We test for about 100, but the ones that are actually actionable, that mean something, right? And most of them are doing multiple things. But the way we test for them, that pathway or system interpretation versus gene by gene, gives you much more output or outcome.
Sure.
So, and the specific genes that we're testing for, they're not testing for to some degree. So, for example, we mentioned the detox genes that you could be missing.
Yeah.
That's a completely separate test. So I'm sure your listeners, they're savvy people, they've been around and they know what a SNP is, right? So when you're looking at a DNA test, there's that spelling mistake. This G was supposed to be a T. That now means something.
Yeah.
The instruction's been altered. That's what DNA tests typically look for, because that's the data that pharma companies want to buy from them, that they want to own. So we're saying, great, that's okay. The spelling mistake is there. But guess what? There's also something called an indel, an insertion and deletion. You have a spelling mistake. What if a whole page is missing? Not just this letter is wrong. You could be missing an entire paragraph or page from the book. What if you have an extra duplicate copy of that paragraph? That's called insertion deletion. That's something we test for that these guys typically don't, because it's not part of that sort of one size fits all style reporting, 80% chance of Alzheimer's, right? The other thing we test for is what we call a copy number variation. Forget about the page you don't have the book. It's missing. Right?
Oh,
You didn't
man.
get the gene. You don't have it. So there's nothing to look for. And in these SNP tests, you mentioned 23andMe, they assume those. So
Yeah.
by, again, looking at data of, well, 80% of people that had this typically were missing that. So we'll assume that this person was missing it. So that brings the level of accuracy down. There's a gentleman named Dale Bredesen who wrote a book about reversing Alzheimer's. Brilliant man and he's one of the few people that literally has taken Alzheimer's patients and brought them back to normal, right, or pre. And one of the things he said is that he doesn't like to use DNA tests because he finds they're only 70% accurate for the most part. And he's talking about these SNP-based tests because there's so much assuming in the algorithm.
Sure.
But only ever gets you to, going back to the very first point, you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. What is that going to help you with, right? So yeah, that's a key.
Wow. Okay. And then I promise the very last question is one objection I've had from different clients around going in this realm of testing their DNA is privacy. More than ever, some people are having concerns around, could that be leaked? Could something come out? Could that be used against them in some way? Just curious for your thoughts on that.
That's a huge problem in this industry.
Yeah.
Admittedly, that's and it's fueled by the way the industry was designed, which is the polar opposite of what we do. So what happened in DNA? Everybody knew that this thing was a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Goldman Sachs just put out a report saying that genetic therapeutics is going to be a $4.8 trillion industry by 2030, which is bigger than the entire American healthcare industry, which is currently 4 trillion, right? So just as one part. So everyone is pursuing that. The problem was that at the base level, it starts with genetic testing. The problem with genetic testing is you only need to do it once. If I test your DNA, I've given you a report, I don't ever need to talk to you again because your DNA doesn't change. So the business model for genomic testing was broken. And these companies that were getting a lot of funding, all of a sudden things got paused. Their investors said, well, this doesn't work. You sold it. Like, how are you going to re-engage? What are you going to do with these customers? If I test for cholesterol, blood, whatever, I see you every couple of years, right? So there's a model there. That's where they got to, well, we have data, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there. So it turned into the genetic testing business was, how do we make this the most recreational sort of infotainment product to sell the most maximum number of tests, to then get the biggest amount of data pool to have the most valuable product to sell to Glaxo and Pfizer and Moderna and all these guys. And you would answer the question of why was 23andMe's funding around 2 years ago $300 million from GlaxoSmithKline? What happened there?
Yeah,
right? And why
there's
all of a
something
sudden
there.
Yeah. Why all of a sudden was their biggest marketing campaign that they ever had right after that funding round was they figured out exactly the model. Here's what gets us to data. Here's what the data is worth. Here's what you can make out of data. We just need more data now. Sell, right? So in that model led to this whole privacy concern because you weren't buying the test to get somebody giving you the best information. The test was designed around what data needed to be collected. And the whole model was, if you're not allowing your data to be sold, you're not a very valuable customer.
Right.
So that again led to leaks, that led to things like agencies that people didn't even know had access to your data, like police type things where, there's famous crimes that have been solved through 23andMe data that people don't even know that their data was going there. So long story short, that's the way the industry works. What we've said is our goal is to mine your DNA and to give you the best, the thing that you're actually looking for. Tell me what's in my instruction manual. I buy a microwave, I get an instruction manual, right? I have it in me, but I don't know how to read it. So do that for me, please. That's what we said is if we can do that really well, we don't need a data business, right?
Great.
The missing thing was, how do you work with your customer ongoing without selling multiple tests? Well, that becomes the coaching, that becomes the additional reports, that becomes the solutions, the supplements, all these things that we would then wrap around to truly have a win-win where we have a good business, but the customers benefiting to the degree that they actually wanted to and what they expected and why they gave up their DNA to begin with. In that model, it's very secure. We don't have the concern over that because it's in our contract. We don't sell data because it's not our business. In the other model, I would be very careful because the whole point is to collect your data and sell it.
Yes. Yeah. And even the pricing, it's so affordable. It's this, that, and the other. And then there's questions as to the why for that. So yeah.
And when you look at price shouldn't be about price, it should be about value. If I paid somebody a little bit less to get nothing, I actually spent more. If I paid somebody a little bit more to get everything I ever wanted, then some, that's value, right? So, and you have to approach your health in that way, because most of the products that aren't covered, aren't paid for, aren't reimbursable are the ones that actually address root cause that don't lead you to a pill. That's why they're not covered. And yes, it's out of pocket, but what else should you be investing in? If you don't have your health, what do you have?
So true. Wow. Well, you are just a wealth of knowledge. I so appreciate you taking the time to not only just, share the highlight reel, you're really going in deep with us and helping us to understand how this could be applicable in our own lives and really getting nuanced so that from the 80-20 analogy, the 20% aren't getting left behind in various regards. And certainly many of the people that are finding themselves to something like sleep as a skill have had a series of things where something's not working. And so to have that kind of voice on let's go deeper is so important. So I just so appreciate you taking the time and for what you're building. I can't wait to follow what else is to come. I'll certainly be connecting with you at Biohacking Congress. Anyone listening, certainly encouraged to, whether you join virtually or in person, to hear more, because I know you'll be sharing more there. And absolutely go and check out the website and see what could be possible to go into this whole new realm.
Awesome. That's awesome. And it's a pleasure talking to you. I love talking to people like you that are diving deeper and, changing the world. So pleasure to be here.
Well, the feeling is mutual. So thank you again. And we'll be following all your progress.
Awesome. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Mollie's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepasaskill.com to sign up.